Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. Please join me in welcoming Lea Kenney, Executive Director from Gender Spectrum, to the stage.
Thank you. It's truly an honor to be here with all of you today. And given that I am a storyteller, I thought I would start with a story. And given that I'm here to talk about gender, I thought I would start with my gender story. And because who doesn't like to share their awkward elementary school photos, I brought those with me today because nothing tells a story like a photo. I am really hoping, though, this catches on. Maybe Secretary Clinton tomorrow will come with her childhood photos. Governor Patrick might come with some photos. I'm pretty excited about seeing if this is a wave that will catch on. So this is me in third grade. All of the pictures that precede that look pretty much the same, except my hair was longer. I got it cut that year because I played a lot of sports, and I finally had it with that, and the headbands that my mom insisted on. And so that was last year of that. And the next picture I want to show you is my fourth grade picture. And you might wonder what happened between those 2 years, because clearly I look different than I did. And the difference really was the school changed its dress code. It's that simple. Even today, when I look at that picture of me in the third grade, I really don't see myself. But in fourth grade, I do. Now, what you can't tell from that photo is that fake silk shirt I have on in that fourth grade picture was really actually pretty happening. I felt amazing in that picture. It was polyester at its finest, without a doubt. And at this point, when the school changed its policy, I went to my mom, because all decisions went through my mom. And I said, you know what, I really have had it with the dresses and the headbands. I want to pick up my own clothes. And she was concerned. I think she was a little worried about what kids might say at school, but I think she was also, knowing me, was a little worried about my fashion choices. But eventually she said, okay. And the only condition she had was that I still had to buy my clothes at Sears because my grandfather worked there and we got an employee discount. So I did that. And I was lucky in a lot of ways in elementary school because I was a pretty popular kid, so I didn't experience a lot of bullying that other kids did. But it was still a difficult and confusing time as I tried to figure out how to fit into society's ideas of what it means to be a girl. I knew I was expected to conform, but I didn't know how to without denying parts of myself, without shutting down whole aspects of who I was and leaving those behind. And I was aware even then that I wasn't the only one that had to struggle to fit in, but most people seemed to be able to make do in the boxes that they were given, but I found those boxes incredibly suffocating. A lot's changed then, a lot's changed for me, a lot has changed for society. And a lot is changing in our organizations, and both the organizations you're a part of in the rest of your life, and then certainly our corporations and our professional lives. When I was starting out in my career, it was clear I was to fit and conform to the organization. Nobody cared what my gender was. Nobody cared actually much about me except whether or not they wanted to hire me and then how to get the most out of that. That's really different today. Organizations are expected to adapt themselves, to embrace the diversity of people coming in their doors. Millennials, of course, are driving a good part of this, and much of our corporate work starts with this thing, what about those darn millennials in one way or another, right? And the changes that are coming because of that. Certainly the millennial generation is the first generation to see gender as a spectrum rather than a binary. That's certainly influencing things. A data point I find really interesting was a recent Harris poll conducted found that millennials, 12% of millennials identify as transgender or gender nonconforming. That's a lot of folks. If you add those that just reject the binary and limited notions of gender, it's really the vast majority of the millennials. And while many of us are struggling to figure out how to respond to this, I have to say it does not get any better. That if the millennials are a gender wave, the group of high school and middle schoolers today is a gender tsunami. These kids are amazing. They don't even start with a lot of the tolerance that actually the millennials have. as we continue to try to adapt and find our way. They just won't have anything of it. It's interesting when you look at the stats around that generation, the majority of them know somebody that goes by gender-neutral pronouns. So they or Z or something like that. They overwhelmingly support all-gender bathrooms. Less than half the time do they go out and they look for products consistent with their gender identity. So, there is no clothes section for girls that they're running out to and buying all their clothes. That just doesn't exist for that generation. It's not to say that today's youth and young adults aren't affected by the limitations of gender. They are. The difference is they're likely to push back. The other difference is their parents are likely to push back. It's interesting to me, I got a call from one of the ERGs that was looking for us to do some sort of gender work in the organization, basically a brown bag around gender literacy. And it was a Pride ERG. And the head of the Pride ERG said, what's been most transformative about their ERG is that it went from being primarily led, this was an LGBTQ ERG, by gay and lesbian folks, to being run by the parents of gender diverse kids. And that's not that unusual anymore. So change is here whether or not we're ready. That being said, if you're wondering sort of what to do about how to adapt to the changing gender landscape and you're unsure about how to handle that, you're not alone. You're in the majority, not the minority. The good news is, however, that while gender is complex, it doesn't have to be complicated. And there are companies making tremendous headway. And let me give you a few examples of those. Some of you probably heard about Target getting rid of the blue and pink aisles in the toy section so that they stopped gendering toys. They also came out with a new home product line for kids, and they expect that will help double Target sales of kids' home goods within 3 years. Brands are including boys and men in ads for products that were once exclusively marketed to girls and to women, and vice versa. In one example of that, Hasbro, which has been eliminating gender-based marketing for some time now, realized things like 30% of their global TV audience for My Little Pony is boys. Right? Surprising, but only because we weren't asking the questions. Because we've been telling people who our products are for instead of allowing them to buy our products. I remember a story, I don't know, Leah, but there was a story a while back about a kid that wanted to buy some clothes at a shop that some of you may know called Justice. It's a Justice for Girls. It's a girls' clothing shop. And they reported on all the machinations they went through to just talk to the manager at the store to see if it's okay if their child, who was a boy, could come and buy some clothes there. When our customers have to ask us whether they can buy their products, we're doing something fundamentally wrong, right? When they don't know that, yes, we want to sell them every product that we have, and happily so, then we're inserting some gender messaging in there that's getting in the way of not only our business success, but what our consumers need. MAC Cosmetics, Sephora, and CoverGirl, and other beauty companies have also degendered makeup and other products, choosing models that represent the full gender spectrum. There are significant financial benefits companies experience in rethinking gender. Some of those benefits are certainly improved recruitment and retention of employees as people want to work at organizations that are inclusive and forward-thinking. We get access to new and expanded markets as we reconceive who our products and services are for and how we communicate this to our target audiences. This sort of gender inclusivity affects everything from product development to how we train, sell, support, and distribute our products and service. And those of you who meet these demands will reap significant economic gains. When many of us talk about gender, though, in our organizations, we think of issues related to pay equity, gender representation, and management. And sometimes, what are we going to do about the bathroom situation, as all gender bathrooms become increasingly asked for in our corporations? And these are critically important indicators of organizational health. But they're not the end goal. They're metrics. They're measures. The real opportunity at stake, I think, in the gender conversation is unlocking human potential for all of us. You're here this week because you care deeply about solving the critical challenges of our day. That's why I'm here too. The solutions needed in our companies and in our society require new thinking and approaches. To generate that, we need all of us to bring our full selves to the table, to reclaim the parts of ourselves that we've left behind. We assign gender not only to colors, but to ideas and to feelings. We cannot constrain ourselves in one area without constraining ourselves in other areas as well. And as we try to fit who we are expected to become, or who we are expected to be, we become less of who we really are. The impact of your leadership on gender will not only bring increased business opportunity and revenue, it has the possibility to transform the people around you and liberate the creativity and innovative thinking to address our greatest challenges. There's a lot at stake. So if you're wondering what is something you can do today, let me give you 3 suggestions that you can take with you. 1, understand your own gender story. If we don't connect to our own gender story, it's difficult for us to help others connect with their own. And our stories inform our assumptions, our beliefs, and our biases. I had a great conversation not long ago with a corporate executive, and we were meeting to talk about what he was trying to accomplish around gender. And I asked him, and a lot of the metrics came up, representation, pay equity, et cetera. And I said, okay, but what's the bigger picture? What's the impact that will have? And he struggled a little bit more about that. And I said, well, how do you think your gender has informed the organization as a leader? And he sat with that for a second, and he struggled a little bit, and he said, honestly, I haven't really thought very much about my gender. And I said, that's okay, most people haven't. I said, what's the earliest gender memory you have? Just where did you get a message about what it meant to be a boy? And he told me the story about his passion as a child, as a 7 or 8-year-old boy, and how much he wanted to be a chef and to cook, and how much he loved being in that environment. But he was told at one family holiday that he had to leave the room with the women who were doing the cooking, and he needed to go and watch the game with the men. And in that moment, he realized that it wasn't just about cooking that he let go of. He took on all the other things associated with these understandings, these notions of what it meant to be a boy and a man. And while we really struggled in the first part of the conversation, we probably talked for the next hour about what he came to realize in his own gender story and the impact that these limitations had on him too. So, understand your own gender story. Number 2, put on a gender lens for a month around your organization and see what you see. How does the organization view gender, and how does it show up? Not just diversity and inclusion, but all of HR, but also product development, marketing, sales, customer service, and then just pick a place to start. And finally, establish gender literacy in your organization. The truth is, as I said, most people just simply haven't thought very much about gender. We need to give them a basic framework that gender is more than our biology. It is also a fundamental understanding of our sense of self and how we live and express our gender in the world. And we need to provide this gender literacy in a safe place where people are allowed to bring their questions and their concerns and to try to understand where they fit in terms of what you're trying to accomplish as an organization. While the challenges are great, so are the opportunities. I wish you all well as you try to navigate these new understandings of gender. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. It's nice I had the chance to be here at the beginning, and now as we move toward the final couple sessions of the day, to come back. We have a terrific panel here. Dr. Pauline Williams is the Senior Vice President and Head of Global Health Research and Development at GlaxoSmithKline, where she focuses on malaria, TB, and other non-communicable diseases in sub-Saharan Africa. Through most of her career, she focused on early drug discovery and development. And among her achievements are initiating and leading a project to develop a gel that is used to prevent neonatal sepsis, which is now used in 7 countries around the world. She's also a fellow of the faculty of the Royal College of Physicians and a council member of the UK Medical Research Council. And next to her is Keun-Tae Park. Mr. Park is the CEO of CJ Logistics, which is the largest logistics company in Korea. He also spent 30 years living in China and is the CEO of CJ China, a very large corporation there. And we're very pleased to have both of them here to talk about some very interesting shared value initiatives that they've each been involved with. So let me start by asking Mr. Park, if he would, to describe to us the initiative.
Good afternoon. I'm Keun-Tae Park of CJ Logistics and CJ China CEO. I'm excited today to be here today to share our senior parcel delivery service. Let's take a look at this picture first. This picture was taken during the Korean War. Their face showing the pain of war, and we know from the picture that the children in this generation most probably did not have the luxury of an easy life. This generation who were affected by the Korean War are our aging population today. And despite Korea experiencing fast economic growth, still 50% of South Korean aging population is fighting yet another war called poverty. South Korea's per capita GDP is 30,000 US dollar, but Korea's senior poverty rate is 4 times higher than other OECD countries. So what's causing this poverty? Korea's post-war resulted to poverty causing young adults to enter the labor force instead of going to school. But the rapid economic growth in the 70s changed the education paradigm. Parents realized their children needed higher education to succeed in the new economic era. The children's success was put before anything else. As a result, parents was giving up their retirement as well, becoming what we call ed-poor. Families facing financial hardship due to overspending in education. As CJ, we saw this as an opportunity to create a new wave of economic and social progress by solving the social problem. Because creating culture is what CJ does best. As Korea #1 lifestyle company, we lead industry in 4 main business areas. First is food and food services. Second is bio and feed mill. And third one is entertainment and media and multiplex cinema. Last is retail and logistics. CJ Logistics is CJ's main affiliate and Korea's #1 logistic company. Our core business and parcel delivery, warehouse and distribution, and port and delivery and freight forwarding. CJ was built on our founding philosophy called 공전공영, meaning coexistence, which actually is similar to creating shared value. Let me share with you how we applied coexistence and CSB principle to our logistic business. This is a picture of Korea's second largest city, Busan. Beautiful ocean and building. However, behind the scene, you will find very crowded residential areas. Well, this was where it all started. You can see from this picture, such areas are almost impossible for cars to enter, making it very difficult for parcel companies to do delivering. And this was a challenge for us as well. But today, With our senior parcel delivery service, we are able to solve this issue and at the same time practice our coexistence value. So how does senior workers and parcel delivery work? Normally, a parcel delivery worker will drive a truck into the areas where they make delivery with an average of 300 packages a day. But this method is too straining on the senior workers. So we innovated the process by creating drop points instead of crowded areas. When the delivery worker drops off the package at the designated drop point, the senior workers will pick them up and deliver the package to the customer's doorstep. Through this process, we were able to reduce the physical burden and the safety issues of our delivery worker, and also created new job opportunities for our aging population who needed financials to support their life after retirement. As a result, we created 1,400 senior jobs in the past 5 years. And this is a very sustainable business model because the senior workers were able to earn twice more than government-subsidized jobs. We've created a new culture for our aging population to ensure a stable retirement life. And we went further to get one step closer to our customers by providing eco-friendly logistics solutions such as electronic cards for delivery. This success would not have happened without the help of our various stakeholders. And we think this is a great example of a collective impact. Today, we are on another journey. There is a Korean folktale called The Blind Man and Lame Man. The story shares how two individuals collaborate to overcome their disabilities. If you look at the picture, we have a young man who is illiterate. The lady beside him is able to read, but she is unable to carry package due to her physical disability. However, what happens when they work together? We've created a new business model and opportunity for people with developmental disability. Like our company slogan, Live New, CJ continuously strives to create new culture where our coexistence philosophy is the core of our business strategy. I hope you enjoyed my stories today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Williams, please.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
This one all tied up. Thank you. So as Mark said, my role in GSK is head of the Global Health R&D organisation in the pharma part of GlaxoSmithKline. And I've been with that company for well over 20 years, which makes me feel very old, but I'm relieved to know that I've got a job in CJ Logistics at some point. But the reason that I've stayed with the company so long is that I totally buy into the notion that shared value is implicit with the mission of GSK, which is to help people do more, feel better, and live longer. And our new CEO, Emma Walmsley, has taken over from Andrew Whitty, who was a great advocate for global health. And I think a lot of people internally to GSK and externally were saying, you know, is this going to herald a change in GSK's commitment in what has historically been seen as a low commercial opportunity. And I think Emma has been very explicit that she is very proud to work for a company and continue that heritage. But is starting to bring some additional business imperatives across the organisation in terms of increasing innovation, performance and trust. I think many people might think that a global health R&D commitment would fit firmly in the trust bucket. But I think that what I want to talk about is actually how we can demonstrate that it is part of the innovation of R&D that does have shared value, performance, and it does have trust as well. From the innovation perspective, I've got a team of about 150 clinicians and scientists working from discovery right through to development. In fact, we have a medicine for malaria, Vivax, tefenoquine, that's currently being reviewed by the FDA. And our work ranges from malaria, TB, neglected tropical diseases, and maternal and neonatal health. And there is world-class science, and we publish in top journals, and we're recognised as one of the leaders in the field globally. We also have pioneering open innovation models that allow academics to come in and work alongside our scientists in open labs. We screened more than 2 million compounds in our chemistry library and published the data on 13,500 hits that go into malaria box for other people to work in this space. And we think this is all good for business and the greater good. We also have technological advances, innovations such as the adjuvant that was used in our malaria vaccine has now been adopted in the Shingrix vaccine. So things that were originally developed for global health now being adopted for highly profitable and commercial opportunity. I also have to present my science and business plan for my unit in competition to what's called the Discovery Investment Board. So that's sort of like a dragon's den. So we have to compete with all of the other units for a 3-year business plan to say, what are we going to do and what's our return on investment? And I'm lucky to work for a company that recognises that social impact counts equally against commercial impact, and that once I'm given the budget and the priority, I'm then working in a level playing field with the rest of the organisation. Performance, I think we have to show discipline of efficient development plans. We have to have partnerships, share risk. We have to think about novel solutions designed to access by first intent. And also I think the capacity building that comes with working in low resource settings is ultimately going to benefit for future generations in terms of increased levels of research excellence and things like pharmacovigilance when our medicines reach those targets. And trust, I think clearly there is a component of external reputation. We're really proud to be at the top of the Access to Medicines Index, recently the Antimicrobial Resistance Index, and previously Fortune Changed the World. There's also an element of what I would call science diplomacy. I mean, I think there's great value in peer-to-peer connection in terms of working in science partnerships with key opinion leaders in our target countries, with the governments and with supranational organisations. And I think you can cut through a lot of the politics just by talking about great science and benefit to patients. And then finally, employee engagement. And I'll just finish with a little vignette, and may talk about this example more in the questions. But I started a project that Mark alluded to, which is just to actually talk about cutting-edge science. This is probably the simplest thing from a technology perspective, which is an antiseptic to put on the newly cut umbilical cord, which is a major route of infection in low-resource settings. And data had shown that use of this antiseptic at a high concentration reduced neonatal deaths by about 25%, 23%. And so GSK made this into a gel and went through the regulatory process. And I had the honour of going up to the factory that was producing it up in the north of England. And we were rigged up completely head to toe in all the sterile gear. And all I could see of anybody was just eyes poking out of a blue hood. And the gentleman that was running on the chlorhexidine factory floor, running the gel into the sachets, came up to me, and there were tears in his eyes, and said, you know, I've worked here for nearly 30 years, and he said, and all I've done is make people do more and feel better. He said, but now I'm making people live longer and I'm saving lives. And I don't think you can put a price on that benefit. So I'll leave it there, and I guess we're going to be questions now.
Thank you. Yes.
Thanks.
Yes. Thank you very much. So we have about 10 minutes left. I have a few questions, but you all are experts in Slido by now. So please send your questions in by Slido, and we'll be able to ask the panelists. But Mr. Park, let me start with you. you've made the Fortune Change the World list because of this senior delivery project. What was the most innovative or challenging part of launching that project?
I would have to say is the innovation of our business process. By creating a sharing platform, we were able to divide the workload from one to multiple. Therefore, we were able to reach out a bigger pool of senior workforce and create a sustainable business model that benefits both the company and our society by providing our aging population with a secure post-retirement life.
Terrific.
Yeah.
So you really needed to change how you thought about the delivery system from a single route to this divided up system to enable you to employ the seniors.
Yeah.
And I understand it has had positive business benefit for you in terms of market share and so on. Can you speak to that?
Actually, CJ Logistics, we have market share in Korea. Parcel delivery case is about 46% of total market. And then every day, we are moving 17,000 vehicles of a 1-ton truck. And every day, we are moving 5 million boxes. There is a normal delivery. After retired, our senior parcel delivery case is after 65 years old, after retired age, up to 75, somebody is 80. They already retired, stay at home, and then they delivers drop point. We made to their designated apartment, and then we will deliver some goods their apartment drop point, and then they will deliver every day around each person 200 bucks, something like this.
Terrific. Thank you. Well, Dr. Williams, you know, I'm fascinated by this dragon's den, which sounds very scary. And, you know, you have to present your 3-year business plan. The other business units, which are focused more on profit, have to present their business plan. And you said it's a level playing field. And yet your return is really around health outcomes and social impact, not necessarily the financial bottom line the way theirs is. And so how do you make a level playing field when one side is a social benefit and the other side is a financial return?
So, I mean, it's a great question, and I think that the benefit of working in research and development is that it actually is going to take a long time before any benefit comes back to the organisation. So we are, by definition, the loss part of the organisation. And so I think there is an appreciation that actually in that conversation, what you're doing is actually demonstrating the quality of your science and the opportunity to have an impact on health. And so it's very much at the patient benefit. And at that point, it then diverges, because once you've achieved that health benefit, there may be some opportunities where there's commercial gain yet to be realised, and then certainly in the areas that we're working, less so. So we then have to demonstrate how we can not only achieve that health benefit, but how we can do that in the most efficient way, how we can work in partnership to enable that medicine to reach the beneficiary and have the impact. But I think that is why working embedded in an organisation that appreciates and has the sophistication to be able to make the distinction. So we're not ring-fenced, it's not the sort of CSR part that has a kind of capital allocation and go off and spend it and do good stuff. I think, to me, it's really important that we are on that level playing field.
Yeah, terrific. Well, let me build on what you mentioned in terms of partnership. So this is done in partnership with Save the Children, which is a wonderful nonprofit organization, and their CEO is actually on FSG's board. But what are the sort of challenges that you find in working in partnership with a nonprofit?
Yeah, so not everything that we do is in partnership with Save the Children.
Umbilical cord.
That we work with multiple NGOs. But I mean, I think certainly, I think in terms of, well, I mean, I must admit, when the Save the Children partnership was first launched within GSK, and it was told that it was a shared values partnership, I thought that meant that we both had values that were, about doing good for patients. And so it was the shared value piece, I think, came as a bit of a learning curve for me. In terms of challenges of working, I think we've had to work through different perspectives, I think, different cultures, perhaps some mutual suspicion. I think there was one example that was before I got involved, which was when I think the GSK Save the Children partnership was just first in discussion, and they were each asked to draw what they thought each other thought of it. And I think the GSK people drew the Save the Children as tree huggers, and the Save the Children drew the GSK as sort of corporate sort of monsters. And so we had to break down a lot of those barriers. But I mean, I think ultimately when you get down to the fact that you are trying to do the same thing, then it actually becomes much easier. And also recognizing that we're each bringing very different skill sets to the table. We could not have taken the chlorhexidine project to where we did and the speed that we did it and the quality without the input of Save the Children. I heard the example between J&J and PATH earlier, and similar things in terms of the TB exercise in Vietnam, the two bringing different skill sets. And I think that's definitely a model that we need to pursue.
And we do see these shared value partnerships developing between companies and nonprofits, where they each have complementary skills. But I think, what you joked about in terms of the corporate monster and the tree hugger is a very real sentiment out there and is one of the real challenges to overcome. Well, one of the questions that has come in is about how shared value works at the business unit level as opposed to the overarching corporate level. And of course, both of you lead business units. Mr. Park, you also lead CJ China, which has multiple business units within it.
Yeah.
So how do you think differently about shared value in the logistics, which is a single business unit, compared to CJ China, where there are different business units?
Yeah. Actually, our CJ group, we have some philosophy. Our CJ group founding principle called 사업고국, which means the company must contribute to the nation and further progress the society through the business. That's why each unit, like CJ Logistics, we have created that kind of senior parcel delivery. And CJ China, we have another shared value project, like some China, some poor students. We are rebuilding of some school class and also supporting to them, and that kind of a shared value program.
Good, thank you. And Dr. Williams, you also are a business unit within a larger group. And have you encountered resistance or the need to change mindsets because of the larger corporate culture, or it sounds like it's fairly aligned?
No, I mean, I think occasionally we've come across single individuals. So I talked about working on a level playing field in the Dragon's Den and accessing then resources equally with commercial projects. But I think occasionally we've come across individuals who have made their own prioritization decision. They may have their own line supporting a project, may have a kind of resource crunch, and they've got to make a judgment between one project and another, and they've assumed that the commercial project will take precedence. And we've had to really work hard to say, that's not what's happening. And then the opposite end of the scale, I think some people perhaps think that we have a divine right to be spending as much as we possibly can in global health, and actually resent the fact that we're putting some business discipline behind it and are talking about return on investment. And some people who feel that perhaps it's wrong to make a profit on some of our medicines. And I think that those are some examples at different ends of the spectrum.
Terrific. Well, thank you. And I'm afraid, unfortunately, we're out of time. It's a very short panel. We could have talked much longer. But please join me in thanking Dr. Williams and Mr. Park.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're getting close to the end of the day here and just have a great session coming up. I'm really pleased to be able to do the introduction of this session, and you'll understand why in a moment when I explain a bit of the background here. But first, the moderator today will be Lea Gallagher, who's a senior editor at large at Fortune magazine. I was just telling her downstairs, it's the first time I've actually met Leigh in person, but the first year we did the Fortune Change the World list, she did the TV appearance for Fortune on one of the morning shows, and I was just blown away. So very much looking forward to seeing her in conversation with Jen Dulski. Jen Dulski is the head of groups and communities from Facebook, and she is also the recent author of a book called Purposeful: Are You a Manager or a Movement Starter? And it's just making me chuckle a little bit because obviously Jen is now with Facebook, and we were again talking downstairs about the many different ways that Facebook has been in the news recently, and some of which, just to be honest with you, some of which she can talk about and some of which she can't. And I think you sort of all understand she wants to stay in her area that she works in within Facebook, which is groups and communities. In other words, forming communities from the billion, give or take a couple 100 million people that Facebook works with. So certainly at scale. But the reason I was chuckling is because one of Facebook's things that they've been challenged with is around the idea of data privacy. And the funny thing, though, is if you provided us with your address, we're going to send you Jen's book. So it's a funny confluence. And if you didn't, then we can't send it to you. But it was not ready yet for this actual conference, and we're looking forward to hearing from Jen. A lot of the work around that book came from Jen's time as the president of change.org, a website that many of you are familiar with that really has been at the forefront of movement building and really building a confluence of folks who are interested in issues, and you'll hear some stories from Jen about that. She oversaw a tenfold growth in users over a 5-year period. This was building on a career that she spent at Google, Yahoo, starting up her own business and so forth. Now, the reason it gives me such great pleasure, though, is because as it turns out, Jen and I have known each other for the last 20 years. And just feel very fortunate here to have someone that I've known. And even though Jen and I were not the kind of friends that kept in touch on a day-to-day basis, she was one of those people you find in your life that you just track and keep an idea of what they're doing because you're just impressed and you're glad that you're have been a part of their life at some point. So it just gives me such honor and pleasure to bring up a friend and a very successful technology executive in Jen Dulski, along with Lea Gallagher. Please join me in welcoming them.
Hello, everybody. Justin, thank you for that nice introduction. It's great to be here, Jen. It's wonderful to be here to talk with you about your wonderful book that I have read, and it's really great. And when you all get it in the mail, those of you who have provided your information, you're going to really like it. It's very timely, and it builds on so much experience that Jen has, anyway. We'll be talking about it. Another tidbit about Jen and a background is that Jen and I also go back many, many years. We didn't know each other at the time, but we both went to Cornell at the same time, and we were both on the crew team. And Jen was a coxswain, and I was a rower.
That's probably apparent.
We put this together recently. We've come to know each other professionally through Fortune and Jen's position as a tech executive, but we made that connection, so that's another little connection. So Jen, one of the themes in this book is that you don't have to be Nelson Mandela or Gloria Steinem to start a movement. And there's a great quote that you have in the beginning. I think it's originally attributed to the Dalai Lama. Anyone who thinks they're too small to make a difference has never tried to fall asleep with a mosquito in the room. And I love that quote. I love that quote. So the individual is really a running theme through the book. And I imagine a lot of that is based on what you saw in having the front row seat to movement creation at change.org. So first, when we start with, why did you decide to write the book?
Yeah, it was interesting. As Justin explained, I spent many years working in more traditional tech companies, and then I moved to change.org, which many people don't know is also a company. It's a social enterprise company rather than a nonprofit, which I think gets confused. But one of the things that was so surprising to me was that regular people, sometimes really unexpected people, they were kids or grandparents or people who were incarcerated, they were starting these incredible movements, and they were using essentially the same skills that people I saw using in business, tech execs, other company executives, people who run big business units. They basically were doing the same things. They were creating a vision that was compelling. They were persuading other people to rally behind that vision. They were persuading decision makers. They were overcoming criticism and obstacles. And so to me, this felt like what I call the leadership thread that runs between all these people. And it basically convinced me that anyone can be a movement starter, and you can do it from anywhere. And there's one other quote in the book that I love about Laura Linswood. She's the Secretary General of the UN Council on Women Leaders. So she works with the very small number of women who lead countries in our world, which I believe is 50. And she says change goes from the unthinkable to the impossible to the inevitable. And she describes it a little bit like starting a standing ovation. And how many of you have been in a standing ovation, right? All of us, I would assume. And if you think about how that starts, it starts with one person who stands up to clap. And then one person brave enough to follow them stands up, and then suddenly so many people are standing that everyone else stands up. And that's what movements are like, and they really are started by individuals.
So then how do we translate that to the corporation? I mean, we have people here from corporations, and that's a large, really what we're talking about here today. So if individuals can be so powerful in starting change and starting movements like that, how can a company also play a role? Do companies need to have passionate individuals within their organizations? And on the flip side, what do companies bring to movement creation that individuals can't?
Yeah. So of course, companies can start movements too. I will say that my belief is that it starts still with individuals within that company. And that individual can be the CEO of the company or a head of any department. And sort of the more power you have, the easier it is to start a movement within your own company. But it doesn't have to come from that person. In fact, more and more today, these movements are coming bottoms up from people inside the company, employees who get passionate about something.
Can you think of an example of that?
I think a good example is a lot of what's happening around parental leave or policies for women in the workplace. So sometimes what happens is, the movements that helped women get mothers' rooms in most offices happened because individual women at these companies were literally pumping milk in the bathroom stall, and finally stood up and told their own story and said, this is what we need, and that started a movement. And so those are some examples. The other thing that's happening more and more is that companies are starting to get pressured by their customers, as I'm sure we all know, and as we saw a lot happening at change.org, where it's easier than ever to mobilize large numbers of people, which puts a lot of pressure on companies. And so my view is that we're in the stage where this is inevitable, and companies can either choose to lead or choose to follow. And there's a story that I sometimes tell about this, about a classroom of kids that started a petition asking Crayola to create a recycling program for their markers. And this was a few years ago. These kids, they made a video. The video went kind of viral. They got 90,000 signatures on this petition. They love Crayola, right? They're customers of Crayola. They're not threatening not to buy the product. They're just saying, please start a recycling program because we go through a lot of markers. And Crayola didn't do anything. And what happened
Anyone
was...
from Crayola here, by any chance?
I asked in advance because I knew I might tell this story. But what happened was Dixon Ticonderoga. Does anybody know this company? They make the
Pencils.
number 2 pencils. They also make markers. And so what they did was they said, you know what, we're going to start a recycling program. And the CEO of Dixon Ticonderoga held a press conference with the classroom of 4th graders who suggested this and got tons of positive press for their company, and it became a really successful way to drive sales of markers for them. And then about a year later, Crayola, what did they do? They started a recycling program, because when your biggest competitor has one, you kind of have to have one too. And so this is an example of like what it looks like to lead versus follow, and I think we're in a stage where, especially all of you in this room who care about this issue so much, are really in a position to lead here.
You have a point in your book that actually, or a study that shows that the stock prices of companies who lead with this kind of purpose outperform, right? Can you explain the metric a little bit?
Factor of 12. It's from one of the EY Harvard studies. I can get the exact stat to share with Justin. But yeah, I think we've all seen this. Companies that have purpose at their core outperform the stock. Also, 86% of millennials say that they want to work at companies driven by purpose. That's from the Edelman report. So companies that lead here will definitely hire and retain the best talent. And a recent Harvard Business Review stat shows 64% of customers use the values and purpose of a company as the main decision-making factor behind which brands they buy. So for sure, this is good business.
It seems like we're in a bit of a shift. You know, we at Fortune, with the Change the World list, we have documented companies that have built, you know, social purpose into their business model. And there's many, many examples of that. I'm sure you've been talking about it all day long. But in recent months, it seems that we're almost shifting to companies actually taking a much more active stance, almost an activist stance on certain issues, whether it's gun rights, gun control, or you name it, you know, transgender issues that have come up. You know, this has come up a lot. And so are we moving from sort of, you know, this leading with purpose to sort of becoming a corporate activist, or is that all part of the same conversation?
Yeah, I think there's two things I think about here. One is, again, part of this question of leadership or followership. In the book, I actually outline what I call the 5 stages of engagement that companies go through when they feel pressure from their own customers. The first stage being denial, kind of like the first stage of grief. But the highest stage of that ladder is what I call empowerment, where companies or organizations actually empower their own consumers to act on their behalf. And we're seeing this in more and more companies where they want to achieve something, and actually it's their customers who can best help them do that. Some examples are the various kind of gig economy players like Lyft or Uber or Airbnb, who Leigh wrote a whole book about and could talk about as well, who actually have their customers advocate for changing legislation in the neighborhoods and cities where they want to see those things happen. So I think companies have a role to play in an activist sense there by empowering their consumers to act on their behalf. What I will say is that it is a difficult time where I think many of us are feeling a lot of pressure, both from customers and from employees, to take a stand on certain issues. And it can become a very slippery slope where when you take a stand on one thing, why aren't you taking a stand on the next thing? And so from my perspective, I believe it's really important to connect those things to the core values of the company. What you stand for as a company should be what you then take a stand about. I think our customers respect us for that. And it helps to be clear to avoid the slippery slope. So at change.org, for example, we had a lot of employees and our user base saying, you know, why won't you stand up against this? Why won't you stand up against this? And for us as a neutral, open platform, it was really critical that we didn't. Like, we actually could not take sides, or else it breaks the way that the platform functions. And so instead we said, okay, what are our core values? And for us, you know, things like open access to the internet was part of what enabled our platform to operate. And so Change has only ever taken a public stand on one issue, and that's net neutrality. And everything else, we let our users speak. And I think we all know brands that stand for things. It's, you know, Patagonia is a great example. they stand for, belief and appreciation for the outdoors. And so for them to change their homepage to be about our current administration and their view on national parks made complete sense for their brand. And it was a bit of an activist move, but I think it stood by their core values, which is why it made sense.
Before we move on, there is a question related to this. How do you go from an individual, from the audience, how do you go from an individual starting a movement within a company to the company taking on that movement? I think that's a good question.
Yeah, so there's a whole chapter in the book about persuading decision makers, because this is a key part of making any movement successful. You have a clear vision, a story you can attach to it. You start getting those first few followers on board, and then you have the decision makers within the organization to persuade if you're an individual. And there are some techniques that come out of social organizing that I think can be very effective here in business, one of which is called power mapping. I prefer the term influence mapping myself, but social organizers call it power mapping, where you think about the person you're trying to persuade, you understand what it is that motivates that person, who influences that person, what they care about, and you actually try to approach them by understanding what it is that matters to them. And myself, having been in the decision maker seat, which I'm sure most, if not all of you have been, it's helpful. Even when someone's trying to persuade you of something, it's actually good if they understand what matters to you. It makes it easier for you to see the benefits of that decision. So that's one technique. There are a number of others in there to talk about how to persuade the organization to get on board.
And another question here, just from your book subtitle, what is the difference between a manager and a movement starter, and are they mutually exclusive?
Yeah, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think there's been a lot written and talked about in terms of the difference between managers and leaders, and the idea being that managers are people who sort of see the world as it is. They don't necessarily push to a higher level, and leaders are generally seen as people who inspire others to follow them and to get on board. For me, a movement starter is a person who takes that even leadership to the next level. So they inspire others, but they inspire others around a cause, a purpose that matters, and that's the difference that I outlined.
So talk to us a little bit about Facebook and your role. What is your role there exactly as head of groups and communities, and why did you join? Why did you take this role?
Yeah. So I joined, I don't know how many of you noticed this, but Facebook actually changed the mission of the company last summer. It used to be about helping the world be more open and connected, and the new mission of Facebook is about giving people the power to build community and helping to bring the world closer together. And that's why I joined, because I firmly believe in the mission of bringing the world closer together. It's also, as Justin mentioned, very large scale. So for someone who wants to make a difference in the world, to be able to run a product that's used by 1.4 billion people every month is a kind of scale that's really meaningful. And my job is I lead the product for Facebook groups. Can I see a show of hand of anyone who's in a Facebook group here? Yeah, so maybe not as many as I would expect in an audience like this. So maybe I'll explain what they are. So a Facebook group is a group of people that gather on Facebook around a topic that matters to them and that they have in common. And they tend to be around the most important things that are in our lives. So family, there's many groups on parenting of kids of different ages. They're about our work. There's a lot of networking groups. There are neighborhood communities. There are groups about health and addiction and all the challenges that people face in their lives and finding support from other people. If you think about it, it's a way to find those people who can support you and make you feel less alone, that are otherwise hard to find. So for instance, there are big groups of people who are adopted, who come together to talk about what it's like to be adopted on Facebook. And it's not something you talk about in your day-to-day life. You don't go around saying, I'm adopted, are you adopted too? It's very hard to find those people, and all of a sudden on Facebook you can find an audience like that who really relates to you. And they're also about everything, our most interesting hobbies and passions. So everything that people might feel is a little bit unusual about them, they can find other people like them. And one of my favorite examples of that is a group we recently met in the UK called the Very Old Skateboarders. And it's like a group of like women in their 60s and 70s who all love skateboarding. And they all go together and they say things like, you know, before I felt really unusual and alone, and now we're birds of a feather and we're all together. And, you know, there's a group for everything that, you know, if you love chopping wood, there's a group for that. There's a sourdough starters, like just all of these things.
People can find their tribe.
Yeah, you can find your tribe. It also allows people to start to understand people who aren't always the same. So it might be that you all love sourdough bread or you all love the same type of dog, but you don't maybe all live in the same place or have the same political views. And so we're actually thinking now about how we can help bridge understanding in these communities. And so my job is to lead that product. I get to support the tens of millions of community leaders who start and nurture these communities. And we do see brands starting these communities now as well, which I think is a really good tool that we're seeing a lot of companies start to use, again, to empower their own customers to both support each other, but also support the brand. So a good example is Peloton. So people know Peloton, the bike.
Does everybody know Peloton, the at-home stationary cycling phenomenon, sensation?
Yes. The interesting thing is there was a big Facebook group already started by users of Peloton. And the company came in and said, we'd love to take on this group. And now the company runs it. And it's become this really amazing support community of people who are riding their bikes and losing weight together and recovering from surgery and doing all these things. And they're there because they love the brand together and they are making their lives better. And it's not, you know, paid for per se by the brand, but it's just encouraged and supported by them.
So these are all wonderful examples. I think we've also seen examples of how bad actors can use Facebook or other social media to be, with malintent. And so how do you police groups for groups that you don't want?
Yeah, we take this very seriously. Obviously, we've been spending a lot of time on this. I joined Facebook 6 months ago, just over 6 months ago. So a lot of my past 6 months has been focused on this. I have a whole team of people on groups that work just on integrity and safety of groups. And the way we think about it is twofold. So the first is that we want to empower the admins, the people who start groups, to keep their own groups safe. So even more than the Facebook community standards, admins of groups sometimes set their own rules. We actually gave them a tool so that they could set rules for the group, and they can ask someone to leave the group, they can mute people, et cetera, if they don't obey the rules. So we're trying to give admins the tools to keep their communities safe, both through rules and through flagging content for them they might want to look at, et cetera. The other thing is we do focus on proactive detection and enforcement ourselves. So we have, teams of people who build machine learning algorithms to look for inappropriate content and bad actors that violate our standards so that we can remove them.
And how have the issues around privacy that the company has been, that has been a real issue in the past month or so, how has that changed the way you think about groups?
Yeah, I think privacy has always been important to groups. And for this reason, we actually have 3 levels of privacy for groups, even from the beginning. There are open groups that are public, that if you're a part of, everything that happens there is public. There are closed groups which are private, that they're private, but they're searchable on Facebook, so you can find them. And then there are secret groups, which are so closed and private that they're not even searchable or findable on Facebook. You have to be invited by someone else. And so we set the privacy levels so that people can control both the groups they start and the groups they join based on their preferences.
Here's a question that I want to bring up. Purpose and activism are great, but they don't always translate into business alignment. How would you advise internal change agents to actually influence strategy?
Yeah, I think that the most important thing is to understand what the strategy is. And then again, it's sort of like influence mapping we talked about before, but instead of to a person, it's to a strategy. And I think there's 2 techniques that I recommend here after you understand the strategy and make sure that what you're recommending actually does align. I would pull one side from activism and one from business, which is to combine storytelling and data. So I find activists are really good at telling stories and business folks are really good at using data. And if we could just, chocolate and peanut butter those a bit, I think everybody should be more successful. So a good example here is Amanda Wynn. And this is not a company example, but I'll just talk about how she uses data and storytelling. So she was a student at Harvard University. She was raped in her senior year of college, and she went to do what you're supposed to do, which is she went to have a rape kit done at the hospital in Massachusetts where she lived at the time. And she found out after navigating the labyrinth of the police department that in Massachusetts, they only keep rape kits on file for 6 months before they throw them in the trash. Yeah. Can you imagine them doing that for any other crime? This is what's happening to the civil rights of sexual assault survivors. So Amanda said, I am going to do something about this. And she first told her own story. She did the extremely brave thing of emailing everybody she knew and saying, this is what happened to me, will you help me? I want to change this law. And everybody she knew said yes. She had lawyers, she had engineers, she had comedians, like everybody she reached out to said they wanted to help her. And Amanda got so good at telling her story, she actually ended up partnering with Funny or Die to tell a couple of these stories in a less threatening way so that people could understand and take those stories in. And then she put together this group, and they helped her get the data. They went and looked at previous precedents, they went and looked at every member of Congress, and they understood what it would take to persuade each one of them. They looked at the fiscal aspects of the law, how it would affect each district, et cetera. Then she found other people who had been survivors of similar incidents. She raised money to fly them all to DC. They all went and met with members of Congress. And Amanda and this organization she's founded called RISE, they passed this law called the Sexual Assault Survivors Bill of Rights unanimously in the United States Congress. It is one of only 21 bills since 1989 to pass unanimously. And she did it because she was able to pair this story that was really compelling with the hard data to make people understand.
So if there's one lesson you could leave the corporate folks in the room with, what would it be?
I think I go back to, you have the opportunity to play a leadership role here, to be movement starters yourselves. And it might be by encouraging someone else within your organization who has a great idea and helping them shepherd it through, or it might be by bringing your own idea to your organization to start that movement that you want. And it is, I think, viewing your potential advocates and supporters as being all around you is the lesson, right? Similar to the standing ovation, there's strangers standing next to you, but if you stand up and clap, they might too. And imagine if you told a really good story and had powerful data and understood who you wanted to influence, then the people you know, your colleagues, your customers, are very likely to support you too.
I'm just going to end with a little bit of a speed round because there's a lot of great leadership advice in the book as well, just drawing on Jen's career and also how to enact some of these principles she's talking about. So I'm just going to prompt you and just in a couple, few words explain what it is. What is, I can't even pronounce this, ICDICTA?
Yeah.
How do you say it? There's a big
ICDICTA.
acronym thing going throughout the book.
Yeah, when I was growing up, my family used a lot of acronyms. We grew up before texting, but we had these acronyms we would use in our family, like FHB, which stood for Family Hold Back. Like when too many people came over and you didn't have quite enough food, you would tell everybody to just not, so we had a lot of those.
My favorite was IMS. Explain what IMS is.
So in college, when someone calls you to go out, and what you say is IMS, which means in my sweats. Like I'm not going out. I'm in my sweats already. So ICDICTA is an acronym, a horrible acronym that I came up with, which stands for, if I can do this, I can do anything. And the idea is that some of these things are scary and hard to do, and one way to help ourselves get ready to do them is to do other scary things first. So I took that philosophy when I was younger. It was probably even before I met Justin, but I spent a semester abroad in the Amazon rainforest with the snakes and tarantulas, and I joined the volunteer fire department and just did a lot of things that felt really scary. And the truth was then when it came to do other things, they didn't seem as scary.
There's a lot of lessons about rowing, and I'll ask you one or two of those. Tell us what a power 10 is.
Any rowers or coxswains in the room?
Yeah, there's
Yes,
a couple. All right.
Okay. So in rowing, you row a very long race, usually 2,500 meters, and everybody is working really hard, rowing their hardest the whole race, but there is a concept of a power 10, which is 10 strokes at your absolute maximum. And the idea is you use them usually when you're just about to pass another boat in a race or when you're just getting to the end. And this concept is also really helpful in a work environment. I think the concept of a power 10 that everybody can pull together for some important project just to get it over the line is really important. And people often say, life is a marathon, not a sprint, but some sprints are really helpful when you need them. Mm-hmm. The key thing about a power 10, though, is that you can only take so many. And in a given race, I think it's usually 2 or 3, and then people will just max out. And Leigh told me before.
Yeah, I've been on the other side of those power 10s, and you get really mad after 2 or 3 of them.
Right, because the coxswain calls them, but the rower has to do it. So managing how often and how many power 10s is important.
Another interesting management philosophy you have in there is the 90-10 rule. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, so one of the things I found managing teams at a lot of places is that there's this concept of empowerment. Like the more empowered people feel, the more likely they are to to be motivated and happy at work, to be successful, et cetera. And so the idea of 90-10 is that people should be able to make approximately 90% of the decisions that are required to do their own job. And it doesn't have to be exactly 90, it could be 80, 85, but some number where you say, okay, I need to be able to make most of the decisions. And I actually have used something called decision log to track who makes what decisions and how often and for what reasons. And it's really helpful because if people get into a place where they really aren't able to make those decisions, then I find either I'm asking them to do something that I shouldn't be, or I'm micromanaging them, which is bad. So we use, at most of the companies I've worked at now, the 90-10 rule.
And when we're talking about wanting employees to feel this greater sense of purpose, I think that is absolutely critical in that. So, well, that's unfortunately all the time we have. Jen, thank you so much, and congratulations on a wonderful book.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leigh.
Thank you, Leigh. Thank you, Jen. I couldn't help but appreciate the marathon comment. I ran the 2017 Boston Marathon, and there were certainly points during that where I think a 26-yard sprint would have been a better idea. So thank you for that. As we close out today, let me first just take an opportunity to do a little bit of updates on the event itself, and then I'm going to ask Christian Frutiger from Nestlé to have the final word and welcome us all to a drink together. First of all, I failed to mention this morning and want to make sure you take advantage of this. We've been working on what we're calling the shared value enterprise model. And it's basically a mechanism for companies to track how far they are along the shared value journey. And we have partnered with the data visualization firm Tableau on this. And Steve Schwartz from Tableau with Georgie Hurst from our team during breaks are out in the lobby, sort of next to the registration desk. They have a big screen set up, and you can go talk to them and check out what we've done around some data visualization in how to track progress in shared value in your organization. I want to offer a series of thanks here, and I hope that after I mention all these, you can all join me in thanking these folks. There are a lot of people, suffice to say, who work very hard to make this a seamless experience, to make this a great day, and I want to acknowledge a number of them by name. First and foremost, and I can't name them all, of course, but we have the staff here at the Conrad Hotel. I think you've probably noticed, for me, for instance, downstairs, Robert is one of the servers. Have known him now for the 5 years that we've been here, and I think it's just indicative of how thoughtful they are and how hard they work to make this a great experience. Back in the AV area back here, every time that you can hear what we're saying, we have Anthony, Joshua, Carlos, Christopher, and Ernest to thank for all of that and getting all of our speakers ready. And as I said, Impulse, our event management firm, Cheryl and Scott and their team, And again, these aren't abstract ideas. These are people who are working very hard to make that a great event. So can you give me a very, very loud thank you to all of them? Now, as I ask Christian to come up and join me here for a final word, I want to point out for all of you that love New York and all that it has to offer, I want to draw your attention to our 8:15 a.m. start time tomorrow morning. I will be ringing the chimes myself out in the lobby to get you in for a great start of the day with Kathy Pickus, Gary Cohen, and my colleague Kathy Lynch. Great sessions tomorrow on the built environment. Deval Patrick, former governor of Massachusetts and now heading the Bain Double Impact Fund. And of course, closing tomorrow with someone that I think we all know, Hillary Clinton. So it promises to be a great day. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming Christian Frutiger.
Well, thank you, Justin. What a challenge. Say a few words about the day and standing in between you and the cocktail. So I might start with a few words about Nestlé. Well, Nestlé was initially created over 150 years ago. Today we're the world's biggest food and beverage company. Over 150 years ago, we were created to help solve a societal problem. And that was to save the life of a child of a mother who could not breastfeed, and we solved that problem through a product. We have then been on the creating shared value journey for quite a while, together with Michael Porter and Mark Kramer, working initially on the 2006 Harvard Business Review article, and ever since, and we're also a founding member of the Shared Value Initiative. The purpose of Nestlé, we've talked a lot about purpose already yesterday at the Shared Value Initiative's Leadership Council, and then the Partners Day, where we looked at different things like the enterprise model, which Justin just mentioned, or also when we talked about shared value ecosystems. The purpose is really important. Nestlé's purpose is enhancing quality of life and contributing to a healthy future. And we bring this purpose to life through creating business value and societal value. Through our products, we actually sell 1.2 billion, or even more of those, every single day. Through the communities in which we work and where we source our raw materials from. And then, of course, through stewarding the environment, water, for example, which is critical literally to almost every single product of the company. About the day, today I was marked, I have to say, this morning by Michael Porter's holy moment, which really showed, where he showed that financial markets are moving, are making progress on shared value. Even activist investors are now seem to be going into this direction. And that all of a sudden, the onus is on us. And throughout the day, we've talked a lot about different ways of doing that. We heard about how Humana has completely integrated shared value into their business. We heard from TIAA, Roger Ferguson, well, how far starting in toilets at Harvard can actually get you. We had inspiring stories, supermamas, artificial intelligence, just now BU, business units, and creating shared value at the business unit level. And of course, Jen's wonderful stories on her work, first at change.org and now at Facebook. And in between we had the solution salons, or saloons, I don't quite know how to pronounce that, but where we also had inspiring and fascinating discussions. Now, let me go back to Michael's point on the onus is on us. Yes, we have to find a way. I think we really have to find a way to demonstrate now to the financial sector what impact on the numbers shared value has. And somehow we need to break down the metrics, and we need to come up with a set of figures that completely convince them. They've started a journey, but they need to be completely convinced. And I was very happy to hear that over lunch when Michael Porter and Mark Kramer mentioned also their work with George Seraphim, that they're going to work into that direction. And I think that is absolutely needed. And I hope we can really make headway on that. But every single one of us can do their own bit in our own role, daily role. You know, we all have activities in our business units, in our functions, wherever we are, where, you know, that little metric on what is the business impact of the work we do is absolutely critical. And I think every single one of us can do something, and it will eventually ladder up to that greater picture. But yes, we need to find the metrics to show the financial impact. That is critical. I personally completely believe and firmly believe that the future of business, you know, in any form or shape, is shared value. This is why I joined Nestlé now a bit over 11 years ago, after a life in civil society, and seeing that, you know, philanthropy just somehow doesn't work. There have to be business solutions to societal problems. So I completely believe that this is where the future goes. When you listen to Jen and when you listen to what our consumers say, what our customers say, what the next generation say, Gen Y, everybody talks about Gen Y. Gen Z, I have 2 at home, very different story, goes very fast. This is where the future is. And the future for me is in shared value. Now, Nestlé is a big food and beverage company. So without further ado, I would like to invite you to food and drinks. The reception is outside. Thank you for the day. Thank you for your engagement, and enjoy the reception. And tomorrow, of course, the second day of the summit. Thanks a lot.